everyone. On this episode, we talked to Alex Segura, and since we recorded, his job has changed, so you'll hear us refer to some of the old jobs he used to do. He is currently the Senior Vice President of Sales and Marketing over at Oni Press. The other jobs were in the past for him, but still exciting, and I think you'll enjoy our discussion with him and about them.
Congratulations on your promotion, Alex.
Yes, congratulations. Hello, and welcome to the Gotham Outsiders, our Batman book club. Coming out of the grave, and I'm not doing fine. I'm your host, Bat Obsessive Chris, and newly minted admirer of Jason Todd's thighs, my co-host TJ.
Hello, everyone. I am your Chris proclaimed Batman acolyte, and I'm hanging those thighs on my walls as I speak.
I don't know what that means.
Pictures right out of the comic.
Gotcha. That's slightly less violent than the image I had. But we aren't alone to traverse this wild, wild city that is Gotham. We couldn't get anyone from Metropolis to help us, so we actually called someone from a galaxy far, far away. We have with us writer and co-president of Archie Comics, currently book out for the Poe Dameron novel, Alex Segura.
Hey, thanks for having me. I'm happy I made the trek to be here.
Yes, how was your journey?
It was good. It was long. We don't have transporters in the Star Wars universe, so I was just on a X-wing most of the way.
Right. No mother boxes to get you here is what I'm hearing.
Yeah, exactly. I couldn't bamf over here. Oh wait, that's a whole different continuity.
You're lucky because your intro was almost about Riverdale. So just
Yeah, I was surprised. I guess that's what I get. What happens when I tangle with so many brands. Like, I have to roll the dice and see what's used to introduce me.
Fair enough.
Well, thank you so much for coming.
Oh, it's an honor. I love the podcast. I think I messaged you right after listening to a few episodes, and I was like, this is awesome. Just as a pure fanboy, and then so being on it is doubly cool.
We're so excited.
Yeah, there was the other side of that conversation with me and Chris just going, oh my God, I can't believe he wrote us.
I know, a man who has written Poe Dameron wrote us. I can't.
I know.
I'm a super Batman nerd. It's just it's kind of a weird, not weird. It's just an obsession. It's just
it's a weird obsession. You could say
yeah,
that.
Kind of weird. Yeah, it's a little weird.
We're all weirdos here.
I'm not paid to think about Batman anymore, and yet I still do. So
now, were you once paid to think about Batman? That's not anymore.
I worked at DC. Yeah, I worked at DC I had 2 stints at DC Comics in the publicity department, and so yeah, Batman was very much part of my day to day.
Wow.
In terms of just publicity and marketing, but
interesting. That's cool.
Yeah, it's good.
Well, now, I'm curious. What does a co-president of Archie Comics do?
It's a fancy way of saying a little bit of everything. So
Okay.
I have my hand in editorial, in publicity and marketing, new business, which just means partnerships. We have partnerships with Scholastic and Spotify and places like that, where to get Archie out there in different ways. And
right.
Yeah, so it's like I'm a Swiss Army knife in a good way, I hope.
Do you have any connection to Hot Archie Show, aka Riverdale?
I watch it, and if they have a question or something, they usually send it our way, and we try to be helpful to them. Our CEO is the main kind of point of contact between Archie Central and the TV stuff. But yeah, we interact with them. It's I was at a party once with them.
Oh my gosh,
that's so fun.
It was neat.
Are they as beautiful in person?
They are beautiful people. Yeah.
Aw, rad. Oh, that's so cool.
Yeah, it was neat.
Prepare yourself for us to figure out how to shoehorn in Riverdale references throughout this talk of Frank Miller.
Oh, that's a prism that'll be very interesting to hear in retrospect.
It is my personal challenge, and I don't know how it's gonna happen, but we're gonna try.
Oh no.
Yeah, I feel like Riverdale is a different kind of noir than but we can talk about what my definition of noir is.
Yeah. Yes, I feel like now we're just talking about Riverdale. I feel like Riverdale is only a third noir, and it's only when it's Jughead and Betty solving mysteries. The rest of the time, it's the epic highs and lows of high school football.
Shirtless men.
And shirtless men.
Yeah, I was, as a kid, I loved 90210, and then eventually got into stuff like Melrose Place. So I'm totally there for the soap opera and drama and teen drama. And so them sprinkling in like this noir Twin Peaksy vibe is just like added. It's the frosting on the cake that was already really good.
Yeah, I'm doing a rewatch right now, so it's all very fresh for me, and I love it.
Yeah, that first season is a home run. It just establishes the world in such a great way.
For real. We're just gonna fully hijack this podcast. We're just talking about Riverdale for the
Yeah, we are now Riverdale Outsiders.
Surprise, it's a Riverdale podcast.
Yeah, spoiler.
Well, we have a game for you that is designed specifically for you, Alex, and it's a new game we've never played before. Yes, we are going to play Is It Batman or Star Wars?
Oh,
this almost was it Batman or Riverdale?
TJ knows from before the show where I was really debating on doing Is It Batman or Riverdale? But not gonna lie,
I mean, that would be a little bit easier, yeah.
I feel like they were way too distinct. This one, harder than you might think.
Oh, I'm ready. I'm ready for the challenge. I'm ready to be embarrassed when I'm wrong.
Well, you have a 50-50 chance, even if you don't know for sure. So, we're going to be okay. So you both have a chance to answer. You can either agree with each other, in which case, if you're right, you'll both get the point, or you can disagree with each other. It's up to you. Okay. But you all get to answer all of them.
Awesome.
Your first quote: all men have limits. They learn what they are and learn not to exceed them.
Star Wars? No, Batman. I don't know.
I think it's Star Wars.
Okay, TJ?
I'll go with Batman then.
TJ gets a point!
Oh my god, nice. I guess. I just did the opposite of what Alex said.
Yes. I have to admit, I was confused for a second, and I was like, this is not from Riverdale. I completely lost the thread.
Well, if it makes you feel better, the rest of the line would have made it way more obvious, because the rest of the line is, I ignore those limits. Bruce.
Ever the contrarian, the rich contrarian.
Right. All right. Your next quote is, your focus determines your reality.
I'm going to say Batman, even though it sounds very Star Wars.
Then I will go with Star Wars.
In a shocking twist of events, TJ gets a second point. That's Star Wars.
That's what I get for trying to outsmart myself.
Like I said, I'm just doing the opposite of our guest. It's working.
Reacting to the worst guest ever.
Oh
no! No, not at all. Don't worry. There's plenty of time for you to still trounce him. We'll get there. Yeah. Okay. The training is nothing. The will is everything.
Star Wars.
I agree. It's Star Wars.
You're both wrong. It's Batman.
Oh wow. Okay.
Huh. Right? It's hard. They really talk the same. Apparently, is what I learned.
It's like Jedi. Robin's like a form of Jedi. Like a.
I think so. Right? Like they're basically the Jedi.
What color lightsaber? Yeah. What color lightsaber would Batman have?
Blue, I think.
Yeah, blue or green, I feel like.
What about like yellow to match his belt?
Oh, that would be so cute.
Chris, yeah, that would be fashionable. Yeah.
That's right. Whenever we play the Batman games, we make all his gear purple.
Yeah, I mean, purple's solid. That's a great color.
Right? It looks good. So Red Hood and Red Robin would both have red ones, despite being...
fair.
Wait, is Red Hood a Jedi? Maybe he's a Sith.
I think he's a Sith, yeah.
I think you're right.
Between them.
Nightwing would have a blue one.
Yes. What would Damian be? I think
green.
Green.
Yeah,
green.
We got there.
Yeah.
Spoiler would have purple, we gotta say. Yeah.
Spoiler.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, I love this. Somebody draw fan art of them with lightsabers, please.
Make it so. Oh,
wait a second. All right. If you let it, anger will destroy you.
This seems like a trick. I'm gonna
say Batman.
I'm gonna go with Star Wars.
It's Batman!
Finally.
It was a trick because it's real close to that Yoda line,
I
right?
know.
Yeah, it just felt so Star Wars that I tricked myself again, but this time I was right.
Yes. All right. Criminals. They are by nature a cowardly, superstitious lot.
Okay, this is a trick.
Yeah.
It's Batman, but I tweaked this line in the Poe Dameron book.
I would say Batman because I feel like criminals isn't a word I've heard in Star Wars often, but I know that's probably not right. I don't know.
Well, what did you go with, Alex? Did you say it is Batman, or do you think it's from your book?
It's from my book, so it is Star Wars.
It's so close to the line from your book, but it is
no.
Batman.
Oh my god.
Oh, no.
I was actually, I wasn't even thinking of that line. I was thinking of when Obi-Wan is talking about Mos Eisley. I was like, maybe
yeah.
that was like, it's close, right? It's almost the same.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's what I was
pretty close.
thinking.
But no,
Yeah, that was
it's
my
Batman.
little Batman hat tip
Oh.
in free fall. Yeah, I just kind of tweaked the phrase.
You did.
Yeah.
I love that. All right. In my experience, there is no such thing as luck.
Batman.
I'm gonna say Star Wars.
It's Star Wars.
Oh.
It doesn't sound like Star Wars though, right?
No.
That's
It does
Obi-Wan.
sound- It has, yeah, it sounds jaded like Batman. So
I know. It is Obi-Wan.
All right, I'm at 3, and I think Alex is at 2.
That's right.
yeah, don't call it a comeback.
It's anyone's game at this point. All right. This is a new day, a new beginning.
What?
I'm
Star
gonna say
Wars.
Batman.
Ooh, okay. TJ said Star Wars.
Mhm.
Yeah, I said Batman.
You got it, TJ. It's Star Wars.
Hey.
All right. Our final 2. Be careful not to choke on your aspirations.
Oh, I know this one.
Do you?
Alex?
Are you sure?
I think it's Star Wars.
Yeah, it's Star Wars.
It is. You both get the point.
I was Darth
Okay.
Vader from Rogue One.
Whoa. All
Nice.
right.
He goes, "Be careful not to choke on your aspirations." as
It
he's
was.
choking
It
someone.
was.
Wow,
I was-
extra credit.
Yeah, for
Yeah.
real. All
I've
right.
seen Rogue One quite a lot.
Our final quote. Sometimes people deserve to have their faith rewarded.
I'll say Batman.
Yeah, I will too.
It's Batman.
Hey.
Oh.
Well done. So that was
Good work,
really
everybody.
close. By 1
Wow.
point, TJ, you won.
Yay.
Congrats.
Thank you.
All right. Well, this is a perfect time for us to dive into the meat of this book.
Batman Year One by Frank Miller and David Mazzucchelli.
All right. So, Alex, why did you pick this book?
I went for the most basic response when we were talking about maybe having me on the show. I was like, what's my favorite Batman story? And I read this book as a kid, first getting into Batman or, kind of obsessing into Batman. And I've reread it over the years and it's held up. But like I was telling you guys before we hit record, my reaction to it is a little different. It just feels like the best synthesis of his origin. It's not... Everyone kind of gets tired of the scene in the alley and Crime Alley and the pearls kind of rattling on the street. And I think it handles that very well, but also sets the stage for his early adventures. And it mixes 2 of my favorite things, which is superheroes, specifically Batman, and crime noir, which is another world I work in a lot with my crime novels and short stories and things like that. And so that's kind of why it's been my favorite. And I think revisiting it was super interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, we read The Long Halloween not that long ago, and I feel like this is like the setup for The Long Halloween, basically.
Yeah, I was thinking it's so amazing that a few panels could lead into basically a 12-issue, two 12-issue maxi series, just kind of pulling from this. Like, and then also the Catwoman stuff became its own series.
Yeah.
The whole thing. So many iterations of the character spun out of this. It's one of those. It had a lot of ripples, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah. I can definitely see that.
Yeah, and like I think it's like the definitive, not origin. I mean, I guess that is the origin of Batman. So like, I can see why people still gravitate towards this because it just there's something gritty and realistic about it, and it's kind of simple, and there's some cool scenes. Not to get too general, but
yeah, I will say you were just comparing it to the Long Halloween. It is a much simpler story. I don't think I have a note at the end that says, "Please have our guest explain what happens in the book to me." Which
it's very linear. It's very linear, and it's not about a mystery, which is why it's more noir. It's not a crime. It is a crime story, but it's much more noir than a mystery story because there's nothing to solve. I think Miller sets it up like you see these two characters kind of inching toward each other in Gordon and Batman, and the conclusion. I'm not spoiling anything. This book's been out for 40, almost 40 years, and then it ends with them connecting. I thought that was really a heartfelt moment.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah. He swiped right.
I think so. Yeah, even though he can really see that well, he didn't have his glasses on.
I love the friendship between Gordon and Batman that exists in the comics. So it was fun because we haven't read all that many that deal with it too often, other than the Long Halloween, which honestly we didn't get to see much because it's mostly Gordon being frustrated with his marriage. So we. But in this one, we actually get to see like the dynamic starting between them and why there's this like implicit trust that develops, and I love that.
Yeah,
I like that Batman realizes he needs Gordon. There's a point where he's running rogue and realizing that there's this smart cop that might get why they benefit from helping each other, and I like Gordon as this media savvy good cop in a bad town, even though that is a trope. That's a trope in crime fiction, but it works really well in comics. And I mean, for me, the big selling point of this book has always been Mazzucchelli's art. Like, it's just beautiful. It's just next level good.
Yeah, I have no complaints about the art. I think it's really, really dynamic. I feel like every character looked like a different person, which from this era of comics is not always the case, right? Like when you read from back then, sometimes you'll be like, okay, which character is this? They look like the same person. But these people all looked very distinct. Like I could see one panel and I'd be like, I recognize that cop from 5 pages ago.
Like even like a character like Flash, who's like the number 2 bad guy, the way his face is drawn, he just looks like this villainous kind of almost like a Muppet. Mazzucchelli's cartooning is it's just really top notch, and I don't know if you've read his earlier Daredevil stuff, but even this felt like a step above. Like he just he leveled up with it, and it's amazing. Like he went on to do even more mind-blowing stuff, but this is really top line.
Yeah, I agree.
Can we circle back to the I need Jim Gordon? Because it made me laugh. I mean, Chris and I read everything with a gay agenda, basically. But the panel made me laugh because it's him looking out at Jim Gordon, and he's like, I need that man. It says, I need Jim Gordon. And then underneath it just says, on my side. And it's like,
there's so I was reading this book and I was going, we're going to have a hard time making this book gay. Like it's just giving me nothing. And then I got to those last 2 issues in which it has the line, I need Jim Gordon. And the other line is Jim Gordon being like, I feel like he's talking about having an affair, right? And he's like, all I do is think about this woman and Batman.
There was not a lot of nuance there.
I was like, in the same sentence, sir.
The
on my sideline to me was like, no homo though. We're not gay though.
Right.
I mean, it's almost like they were saving that payoff, knowing that you were looking for this connection.
It was so nice of him to do that for us. In the 70s, before either one of us were born.
And how did you guys feel about Selena here?
Conflicted, complicated feelings about her portrayal. I think he does an interesting job of setting her up on her way as this character, but even by the end of it, I think I like that he makes a point that she is not cool with being labeled like Batman's sidekick or a reaction to Batman. Like she is her own person. I feel like he, just from a noir perspective, I think he just overdoes it a little bit. Like he goes too hard on, this is a gritty, dark world. It's like, we get it. We know Gotham kind of sucks and it's dark and dangerous, and not everything has to be terrible. Like, and I'm talking specifically about, deciding, okay, she's gonna be a sex worker, and everything is gonna be dark and extreme and gritty, and it just didn't really jibe with her character. But I don't know. It didn't work for me as well as it had in the past, I guess.
Alex, I cannot tell you my relief at hearing you say that, because
okay.
I basically reacted to every woman in this book with just utter frustration. And I was like, I don't want to be mean. This is your favorite comic.
No, and I'm glad we're talking about it, because it definitely, revisiting it yesterday, I was like, this doesn't really track as well as it used to. And I'm glad for that. Like, even we'll talk, I guess, about Sarah Essen and Gordon. And Essen does come back in the Batman canon, I guess.
Yeah.
Much later, and plays an important role, and it's nice. But in as much as just Batman Year One, everything she does is in reaction to Jim Gordon.
Yes.
Like, there's no she has no power on her own, and that was frustrating because I wanted to get to know her better.
Yes. So let's land here for a minute with this comic book's relationship to women. Longtime listeners of the show know that I had was like, at the beginning of the show, I would talk about that I have a spectrum in my mind of toxic masculinity in Batman comics that had two specific anchors. So longtime listeners know that one side of that, the positive side for male writers that write Batman, is James Tynion and Peter Tomasi. Zero toxic masculinity. We love it. We're here for it. The opposite side of that for me was Frank Miller. And I came back to this comic and I was like, I was correct.
Yeah, I mean, I'm assuming you're talking more about like All-Star Batman and Robin,
yes.
which is its own weird. And I think it's just kind of a divisive take on it. A lot of people think it's satire, which I didn't get that from reading it. I just think it is what he wanted it to be.
Right.
I don't know. I'm not in his brain. And what's interesting about Year One is that Batman as a character is not toxic.
Yes.
The portrayal of women in the book can be perceived as toxic, because they're not really, the agency they have is so limited. Like, Selina has the most agency, but it's always in reaction to someone overpowering her story.
Right. So this book, I feel it's definitely, I meant All-Star because that was the one of his that I'd read before now. So this is definitely a huge step up from All-Star, but it's a cake and eat it too kind of a graphic novel where it's like, we're going to kind of comment on these things, but we are still doing these things to these women. So I sent a text to TJ, the very first line, if you read the like crime blotter that comes at the beginning of the comics, it's in some of the special edition, like volumes, and I think it was from the original.
I was confused by that. I didn't know did Miller write those, or was that just like
Yeah, I was curious too.
It sounds like him. But I so the first line is like, Vicky Vale, famous for her voluptuous, shapely ass.
Yeah, I think I read that and I turned the page. I was like, this is not part of the story, and it's just taking me into a weird place. So
definitely flipped. But I was like, okay, TJ, I'm going to give Frank Miller a second chance. And I opened it and I was like, I'm going to try to give Frank Miller a second chance.
Chris was like, this first line though about Vicky Vale's ass, and I was like, what are you talking about?
He skipped it entirely.
Literally the first.
Right, I skipped
it. Some kind of extra material that I didn't have to read. I just wanted to read the comic. Yeah,
I was better off not knowing that.
I know, but now you do. Now you do.
I do.
But I think.
To say,
go for it.
I'm sorry. I was just going to say that I have to say that my weak point with Miller's Batman stuff is the Dark Knight. I read the first Dark Knight. I haven't read a lot of the sequels. It's just I wasn't as interested in that world. But if I'm grading the stuff I have read, I think Year One is probably the closest to the good side on the spectrum you talked about, even though it's very flawed in terms of, like Selina is probably the character with the most agency, the female character with the most agency. And even that is in reaction or pushing back against where she's been put by the story, where the plot has dropped her, as opposed to, okay, I want to know more about this character and her quest and what she's doing independent of what the men are doing.
Right. Yeah. I think with both Selina and Sarah Essen, there is a level of like, we're going to comment on sexism, which for the 70s is pretty progressive, I will say.
This is actually an 80s book.
Oh, is it? I thought it was, it's 87, not 78.
Yeah, 87,
I reversed it in my brain.
No.
All right. For the 80s, it's still progressive.
Yeah, it's pretty good.
Short of the 2000s, having any kind of agenda for women is pretty progressive. So it's something, but you're right. It's like this mixed bag, right? Where it's like, okay, so we're commenting on the fact that Selena is trying to make a name for herself and a man keeps getting credit for it, which is, I think, interesting. Like it's an interesting take on her character, but also she's
a good motivation. I thought. I mean, it was an interesting motivation,
right? But also she's like a dominatrix at the beginning of it, which, you know, it is fine. But if most of the characters we're seeing in the book who are women are in some way sex objects, like sex worker, affair, you know, it's a little bit more coworker that you're having an affair with. When that's all we're getting, that's not great, not ideal.
Yeah, and I need to say a little bit about Jim Gordon's wife, because she's such a non-entity throughout the book that it's and look, I say this with understanding that this is a great piece of work, and I get why people love it, and I did love it for a long time, and now I still like it a lot. But Jim Gordon's wife is such a non-factor, and she's carrying his son. There's the climax of the book hinges on their baby and on her being kidnapped. So I mean, it's just good fiction to make a character important if later in the story they're going to be at risk, you know, so people can care. And so I think, like, by the time you get to the end, you only care because it's Jim Gordon's son. You care through Gordon, not because of this character you have affection for. Which, look, hindsight's 2020, and I'm not Frank Miller, and I'm not David Mazzucchelli, so it's just my 2 cents as someone that's read and redigested this book at different stages in my own life. So, I just wanted more from her. She literally has like three lines in the book.
And there's like
two of them are about lemon chicken.
Right. There's like this really, really interesting off-page conversation we find out about where he tells her about the affair because he doesn't want it to corrupt him. And like, I would love to have read that. I feel like that would have been really telling about both of them as characters, but instead we're watching Bruce Wayne creepily watch him out a window while he has this conversation.
I feel like
I didn't understand that part.
Either.
I feel like part of that problem is that like this book relies so heavily on the internal monologue and telling us stuff. So like I feel like it tracked in the book to not show us that conversation. But that doesn't mean I like that decision. But like it felt on brand for this
it did. The one
it's also
moment
done for dramatic effect. I think he you don't have to spell everything out, and you almost gain more by not seeing it. But I think that would have been a moment where she could have really shined.
I think the one moment of actual like character development for her we get is when she's been kidnapped and gets rescued, and then she picks up the gun and she's like, "If you move, I will shoot you in the head." And I was like, "Queen, yes." At least she wasn't
Sarah
a total.
Essen got a moment like that too.
Yeah, and Sarah Essen is interesting too because we really don't get any personality for her. And then at the end, she is forced to move and change jobs because of a man. Which I think is commentary. I do think it was something of commentary, but it also, we don't get any character from her. So it's like, wow, glad that obstacle is out of Gordon's way.
I think you're being generous by saying it's commentary because I didn't.
Maybe I'm being generous for your sake, Alex.
No, I appreciate it, and I think it's one of those things where, and I wasn't there at DC, and I don't know what the assignment was, but the dots had to connect. So I guess he needed Essen to be a character to play off Jim and show him to be flawed and conflicted, and then knowing that I guess eventually other writers are going to pick this up, she had to be off the board. So it just felt like a plot convenience versus I'm going to make a comment on why this sucks. I
think you're right. I think you're actually right. It could have been a commentary because that's a story that many women have, right? Losing their job because of the actions of a man. But we don't actually get that. That was me saying that it was there.
I mean, and if we're talking about the women just being sexualized and like the wife specifically having no personality, she, to me, I read it as like she was just there to be pregnant.
Yes, I think you're right.
I mean, that's the big takeaway, unfortunately. That's all you can really say about the character. And I was always confused as a fan, now to just totally shift gears.
No, please.
Because the wife was named Barbara, and then eventually Jim Gordon adopts his niece, who is also named Barbara, and then she becomes his daughter. Has that ever been ironed out? Like, I've read so many different things. Okay.
No. Every time we read one from this era, I have to reset my brain because he was like, I'm doing all this for Barbara. I'm doing all this for Barbara at the beginning. And I was like, okay, cool. And then he says something about how beautiful she is. And I was like, huh? Oh, wife.
Yeah,
wife, not daughter. Wife, not daughter. Got it.
It's the Barbara verse.
I reread Batgirl Year One, which is fun. The art's beautiful, and it's a good origin story, but she's very much his daughter. Not that she can't be his daughter without, by being adopted, but there's a disconnect there that I think could be smoothed over.
This is one of those things that the characters from this age shift over into new characters and we pretend it never happened.
Like five reboots ago.
All right. Looking at you, Kane, that was his love interest and is now his cousin.
Yeah, awkward.
His lesbian cousin, no less.
Or James, or his son James, who later shows up. He shows up in Scott Snyder's Black Mirror, if I'm right, and he's not a good person, and that was interesting. That was really cool, but he was never mentioned for the longest time.
And there was also the proto Damien, whose name I'm blanking on at the moment, that they had, the son of the demon son that eventually was Damien, but also wasn't Damien.
Right, yeah, who was in numerous stories as their son and then was not Damien.
Right. This, DC Comics and keeping the storyline going continuously are not friends.
Well, continuity is hard. I mean, you're writing these characters for 80, Batman's 80 odd years old, and so nothing's going to line up perfectly, but stuff like that, especially stuff like this that was planted relatively quote unquote recently, it just was weird. Those are the things that bothered me as a hardcore fan and still bother me as an adult fan, I guess. It was definitely
been a challenge when we started this podcast. As TJ is our newbie to the comics, that he'd be like, okay, continuity wise, what's happening here? And I'd be like, fuck if I know.
Where are we?
I'm not sure. I could even know what comics are happening around this time, but I'm still not sure.
I will say, I think this was one of the first Batman books I ever read. I don't think it was the first, but maybe second or third. I got on a kick when I was 15 and bought a few off eBay. And I remember my first take of this book was oh, this is kind of boring. And I finished it and I was like, okay, I can appreciate it on an artistic level.
Wait, you said you were how old?
I was 15.
And you were appreciating it at an artistic level?
Yeah,
I'm very impressed.
I mean, I got it because people online were just saying how important it was and how it had redefined the character. So I went into it kind of knowing what to take away from it. So I didn't enjoy it as much as I wanted to, but I appreciated it, I guess is a better way to put it. But I reread it for the second time a few months ago and I enjoyed it a lot more. And then I just reread it last night and I'm kind of back to where I was when I was 15 years old.
It's a journey for you with this comic.
No, it's interesting to hear that because I think I first read it around the same age, and which was way before I think you were 15, but I remember liking it because it did mix the things that I was really into, like true crime and comics. And it, there's this segment of the fan base, and I think I would be lying if I said I was never part of it, that wants Batman to be a certain way, gritty and edgy and dark and noir. And this taps into all that, and it makes it feel quote unquote real. And it was very much of the time, in an era where you have Watchmen and The Killing Joke and these stories that were all about deconstructing and less about celebrating. And as I get older, I'm much more up for celebrating, the fun stuff of superheroes. It's okay to have a Batman that smiles sometimes. And not that this is not super nihilistic, dark, grimdark Batman by any means. I think Batman as a character in this book feels almost light compared to some takes. He's just kind of doing his best. And it's nice to see him fumble and fail. And you see that a little bit in Jeff Johns' Earth One and things like that, where you're getting a peek at his early days. But I liked it a lot more when I first read it, and I think it's become a little more problematic reading it again, but it still holds up. I think the art is amazing.
For sure.
Yeah.
I didn't mean to ramble on there.
No, please. I think I don't like this one. I think that's probably obvious already that I don't like this, but I did like it a lot better than the other Frank Miller one that I read. And there's like parts of it that I enjoy, but I think overall, like I don't vibe with gritty Batman. And I think I agree with you. Like this story feels too gritty for me to vibe with it, but the character of Batman, almost with one exception that I'll bring up, is pretty light. Then there is a scene where he does beat up some sex workers for no reason, and that was fun.
There was no need for that. Like, why? Especially when he starts the whole scene by saying, "I don't want to do anything stupid. I don't want to like start punching people. Like that means there will be a problem." And then he proceeds to start punching people and get stabbed in the leg and shot. And
inexplicably, it's fun. It's funny to me because every time I brought up Frank Miller in the past on the show, I'm always like, yeah, the writer that had him punch Dick Grayson in the face as a child in All-Star Batman. And TJ was like, don't worry, it's not like that in the other ones. Well, you did say that. You did.
I am a defender of the Dark Knight Returns.
But you did say it wasn't like that in the other ones. And I opened it and I was like, he punched Selena in the face in this.
To be fair, I didn't remember that.
I mean, I also, from a writing perspective, I just looked at it and I was like, wouldn't this have been clearer if he was fighting off like some thugs as opposed, like, why does he have to fight the actual, sex workers? Like, it didn't click for me.
Right. It does not. Like, so I get that part of the point, I think, is that he's doing a bad job at first, but we see him fight a group of teenagers who are stealing a TV. Why did he feel like that was a crime he needed to get involved in? We don't know.
No crime is too small.
Yes. We missed the scene where he stopped jaywalking, I suppose. Yeah. And then I think, like, he starts the scene with the sex workers trying to help a child, which, okay, I was like, fine, good. I'm glad this is what's happening. But then he ends up throwing said child at one point in that scene. And I was like, wasn't that the kid you started this fight to save?
Yeah, if the point of the scene was to show that he doesn't fully understand what he's doing, then mission accomplished. But I think there were other ways to execute that. Like I said, like maybe he was fighting like the criminals who are like one notch above the sex workers on the street that are actually like the guilty parties here.
Right. Like he's not even, he starts the conflict with the pimp. That's fine, sure, because that person was hurting a child. But then he like, what if I just fight all of the innocent people that have just jumped in to help?
Yeah, I think that scene definitely did not age well.
No, it didn't.
Yeah, it's interesting. I read it before I fell asleep and I couldn't go to sleep because I was just kind of thinking about how this had evolved for me in terms of, I still enjoyed it. I still thought it was compelling, and it just felt over amped in terms of noir, in terms of just trying really hard to tell this edgy crime story. And it's something we grapple with in crime fiction in terms of writing crime novels. And like, just because you show violence and show something bad and terrible happening, you have to strike the balance. You can still tell a great crime story without being gratuitous and without being. And I think the line is, does it feel like the creator is taking pleasure from this terrible thing? And I think like when I'm writing a violent moment, you don't want to lose the impact of the violence or the weight of it, but you want to do it in a way where, okay, you as a reader can tell what's going on. I don't need to overdo it to the point where it seems gross and creepy and inappropriate. And I think that's something that I'm now as an adult and as a writer of crime more mindful of, like, especially with violence toward anybody. Like that's, you can relay the violence and show it on the page. You don't have to overdo it because you want to emphasize a point or God forbid, start seeming like you're taking pleasure in that violence.
Right. Yeah. I think the balance in this is very off. Like there's the majority of the book doesn't necessarily feel like they're taking pleasure in it, but there will be these moments where I was like, really? Specifically,
I think we're thinking of the same one, Chris.
Are we going to talk about this moment?
Like if the book is wanting me to like Gordon, it was a little extreme when he.
Yeah, please go for it.
I mean, when he assaulted Flass, and then I was kind of rooting for him there, even though I was like, you shouldn't be doing this, and then he went too far, I thought, and it almost felt like him leaving him naked in the cold tied up I was supposed to be like, oh yeah, you get him, like you showed him. But when reading it for real, I was kind of like, maybe you went too far. How am I supposed to like you? I don't know.
I had forgotten the part where he like ties him up and leaves him in the snow, and then on the reread I was like, that feels like a bit much. I'm like, you're trying to be a good cop, like I'm all for you like getting even with him and like showing him you're not to be messed with, but then to like, he could have died.
We see Gordon, our hero, like I think Gordon's probably the hero of this more than Batman is, almost, right? Stalk him, attack him, strip him, straddle him, and leave him in the snow. I was like, okay.
And look, to a point you can kind of ride along with that in terms of his vengeance and wanting to draw the line and say, you can't cross me like that. I am my own. I'm a capable like person. But the tying up and just leaving in the wilderness, like it just was too much.
Yeah.
It almost felt like a school bully thing that would, like, I know I've read this in a YA somewhere.
He tied him to a flagpole.
Like, I feel like, I mean, we've talked about how Frank Miller's Batman is all about masculinity and like is the most man's man you could be. And like, to me, this scene is like, I think it plays here too, where Jim, this is like the most, what's the word? This is the most
Alpha Gordon.
Yeah.
Yes.
Like,
okay. My notes literally say how to beat bad guys, out alpha them.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly.
I was ready for him to like pee on them to mark his territory. Like
I wanted a little more outsmarting there.
Right.
I wanted him to kind of outsmart these guys and then show them, aha, don't mess with me.
Right.
And less of I'm gonna punch you harder.
It also I was talking to TJ about this a little bit beforehand. Are either one of you aware what the Stanford prison experiment is?
I've heard of it. I think we studied it in my psych class at one point.
Yeah. So this is a history of Psych 101 kind of moment for us here on the pod. But I was reading that panel and immediately went, I've seen this image before. And I had to like go through my brain where I had seen it. And there was an experiment that would have been fairly recent to when this was written. So I don't know it was intentional. I haven't found anything that said it was intentional, but the timing of it makes me think it might have been. This was a fairly famous study that had just happened fairly recently, where the broad strokes of it, people can go read about it themselves, but the broad strokes of it is that Dr. Zimbardo wanted to study what it would take to push people to be hyper-violent, and how power corrupts. And he did this with a bunch of college students at Stanford, and it led to a very unethical experiment. And that image of Gordon is an image that we see from those studies and how they went wrong.
That's a great point. And I think also if there had been just one beat where he recognized that this was not normal behavior, that he had just been pushed over the edge, I think we would have been more sympathetic to his journey. Like, okay, great. Like they broke you and now you are unhinged temporarily and you are doing these extreme things because you are broken. But I didn't get that. I just seemed more like, oh yeah, take that.
Right. Yeah. It's almost, we don't know. I don't know that he would have seen this study I'm talking about. It was just that the like parallels were so strong and the timing was so strong that my brain was like, this is a reference. Like, I think this is a reference, which made it all the weirder that it's then never commented on, right? Like, yep,
is weird.
He did a good thing. It's totally fine. And then the rest of the novel, he basically just like every time Flask talks, he like barks at him. I mean, that's not exactly what happens, but basically, right? Like Flask is like, I have a thought, and he's like, ah, ah.
Well, he's like almost mocking him because he's broken him. So
he calls him hysterical at one point. I was like, oh my God.
Yeah, like I felt like, and I might have said this already, the scene was meant to have us root for Gordon and be like, yeah, you got him. But reading it, I was like, oh, am I supposed to be judging him right now? But then I was like, okay, we get to the affair after that, and I was like, okay, no, this is the moment where we're supposed to be like, oh, Gordon is flawed. He's not perfect.
On that topic, the very first thing that Gordon says when he comes in and he gets the job is, "Thank you for giving me this chance. I know my reputation is not good." We never get a clarity, like any type of clarity on what he did before. So I was trying to figure,
wanted more of that.
Right? Did he have an affair with someone in his office before, or did he use excessive violence before? Like, which thing are we supposed to believe is a pattern?
Both.
Okay.
I took it as something with his job. Like, it wasn't something romantic. I think he just maybe blurred the lines or did something not good. But I wanted to know more about that, and I guess maybe that was going to be a story that would have been told later. But I think that's part of the problem of, if there is a problem just from a bigger character / IP perspective, is that, Miller and Mazzucchelli kind of parachute in, tell this 4-part story,
right,
and then you hand the keys off to the next people, and it's up to them to really, and that's comics in a nutshell. Like, you're always getting the baton, so you get to cherry pick what you want to work on. So I don't think anyone really thought it was of note, but I wanted to know more about that.
Yeah. I think it's interesting because, generally speaking, after this period in Batman's life, like, I'm not talking about period in comics, but if we get past like the first few years, Gordon then becomes like the good guy, right? Like the one good guy we could trust to be good all the time. So I did think it was interesting that that's not here, like on the page, really. Like, he's better than the worst guys.
He's not super terrible.
The bar is the floor, but he crossed it.
Yeah. And I do like that as a redemptive arc. Like, I like seeing kind of proto Gordon, like, not exactly the Gordon we know, but on his way to being that Gordon. But I wanted more about that journey. And I also wanted it from Batman as a reader during that time. Like, you get this very young Batman who's not particularly good at what he's doing, even though he has the skills to do it. And then after this story is done, you kind of jump forward, and that's just like publishing. Like, they just weren't going to continue from this point. But I wanted more time on year one Batman and like young Batman learning how to be Batman.
Yeah, I think it would have. I think that the Gordon stuff would have worked for me if it's like the comic doesn't quite say that he's going to become better, or that there's no like implication that arc is there. So you just get, this is the bad, and then later writers, this is the good one. Like, what happened in between there?
Right.
Yeah, and I guess because it's an origin that comes in like after 50 odd years of continuity or story, so you kind of know there's a lot of space to kind of leave markers, and just you can kind of hint at things, and it's interesting because it's not the first Batman story, obviously, and so you can play with the past and set up the future without really having to answer everything, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, I agree.
I wish we'd had like one more issue that had allowed us more like interactions and character moments. Like, I really wanted to see Bruce or Batman and Harvey Dent like meeting for the first time for a personal reason.
I was gonna
say but also, like, I don't know, I just feel like we could have had a lot more character beats, not just being told those character beats.
I agree.
That's kind of become a cottage industry, like this whole like riffing off little things from Batman Year One and turning them into longer stories, like Long Halloween and Dark Victory are literally pulled from a few panels from Year One. And I wanted here's my big gripe, and now I feel silly saying it, but I wanted a villain. Like, I wanted there to be, and I realize that there's these are stories about two characters and their arcs and how they intersect, and that's great. But I wanted more of a threat beyond a SWAT team, and the sex workers that he fights, and the pimp that he fights, and I just wanted there to be like a big bad, I guess.
Yes, the SWAT team thing felt baffling to me, because they felt like, okay, we've got to add some extra violent cops for him to fight by the end of it, because overall the arc seemed to be the bad guy is the GCPD other than Gordon, right? Like, they are the problem that's being faced in this story. And Falcone comes in for a minute, but he really isn't so much a bad guy in it as just like a threat for later. And he's still connected to the GCPD. So overall, they were the villains, but then it was like, okay, but let's add in this extra guy with like SWAT to fight instead of actually dealing with the GCPD. And they weren't set up, I felt like.
Mm-hmm.
I guess they should have connected. I'm looking again, hindsight, blah blah blah. But if Loeb, the commissioner, was the big bad, it felt like it needed to be established a little more clearly that he was like the kingpin type figure. Like if you're relating it to Miller's Daredevil stuff, like if that's what he wanted, it just didn't feel as clear, and it just felt like these disparate moments that at the end kind of came crashing together. Like I think at the end you get some momentum. Like Loeb is like, okay, we got to take this guy out. We're gonna make Gordon pay. We're gonna take his kid and his wife and blah blah blah. But it didn't jibe with the rest of the series.
Yes, yeah, that's how I felt too about the big like let's blow up the building at the end. Felt so out of pace with the rest of the book. I was like, no,
it's so extreme.
Yes. Also, what the hell?
Yeah, that like no one's gonna notice that you just bombed a building.
Right.
And I love that there's like a little throwaway line where Selena's like, a bomb went off. I bet it's this guy from the GCPD who it was. And I was like, wait, does he do this a lot?
Yeah, it's like if he's in a bad mood, he just nukes a building.
There goes another building. I guess he's having a bad day.
Yeah, it's just Wednesday.
I think wanting a big bad is fair because I said I found it a little boring the first time reading, and like if there had been an imminent threat building up to, I feel like my attention would have been held a little bit more. And it's like if they adapted this for Batman Begins basically, and they did add in a big bad or two, and imagine watching that movie with like no Scarecrow
or no whitewash Ra's al Ghul.
Yeah. Or even just you could have connected Loeb in some way to the murder of his parents. Like that would have added some connective tissue there. But that's an easy default, but I think Loeb was who they meant the big bad to be. It just didn't feel that way until the very end, and by then you're just kind of careening towards the end.
Yeah.
Is there some like subtext here of Loeb being Jeff Loeb as well?
I wanted to ask about that. Was Jeff Loeb already writing comics at this point? I was like, what's going
on?
I
don't think so. I don't think so. I don't think he was on. I think it was the name, and then coincidentally, Jeff Loeb takes over years later and plays in that sandbox.
Right. I have this headcanon now that Jeff Loeb read this book. It was like, I will become a comics writer.
And became the big bad as well.
Oh,
too soon.
So let's talk about Batman in this story's mental dialogue, or his internal dialogue. Mental works too for what it ends up being. He is like so depressed in this book. It was unexpected, I feel like, because a lot of times he's more, emotionally repressed. In this one, he is like, his emotions are flying all over the place. I was kind of not expecting it.
Yeah, I kind of appreciated that. I really like a more human Batman. I think too many times he's written as this like robotic, super quote hero that just is so driven that he has no time for like human frailties. And I think the stories that resonate with me are when he's flawed. Like I was going to mention this. There's an arc called Venom that was part of Legends of the Dark Knight by Denny O'Neil and I want to say Trevor Von Eden and Garcia Lopez. And it's in, those first few years of Legends of the Dark Knight were all set in this year one space. And it's basically an addiction story. It's about Batman becoming addicted to venom, which is the drug that fuels Bane. And it's really a flawed Batman. And he makes this huge mistake. He becomes addicted and he has to kind of dry out in the cave and he has to reclaim himself. And I think there was a lot of personal stuff there for Denny, who, I think that was like a lot of, there's a lot of narrative in there that I think he could relate to. And, it was just really strong. And I think those are the best stories that, come from a genuine place and the characters feel three-dimensional. So I guess my point is like Batman as like Uber cop doesn't work for me as well as this Batman.
I agree. Yeah, I prefer him when he's kind of a mess. I feel like this is the most of a mess I've ever seen him be written, which was fascinating and unexpected. And it kind of tracks for me that this would be how he started based on where he ends up a little. He's like basically suicidal this entire time, right? Like he's like, I would rather die. At one point, he almost lets himself die on purpose.
Yeah, that scene was powerful. I thought that was really, I think probably the strongest moment of the series for me. Just it felt so, it got to the root of the character, and I wanted to double check and see if Miller was riffing off something that had come before, but no, it was new, and he added it to the mythos, and it feels so iconic now.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah, just that he has his hand on the bell and he knows if he rings for help, help will come, and it's this like, do I call for help or not? It was really powerful.
Yeah.
He was 25 when he came back, and they said he'd been away for 12 years. He left.
Yeah, that math was funky.
13.
That doesn't seem right.
Yeah, and who was with him? Because at a certain point, you don't just let a 13-year-old like traipse around the globe.
Right. And Alfred wasn't with him. So, and we know he doesn't have anybody else. So what on earth?
I guess he went to boarding school, and then maybe that was my guess. Maybe he went to boarding school like in Europe and then became the Batman Begins version.
Yeah, maybe that makes sense. And he just stayed away and trained in the Himalayas, maybe. Yeah, that tracks.
25. I could be Batman.
Yeah. There's still time.
There's still time. I like that both Jim and Bruce hate guns throughout the whole book.
Yeah. There's a really powerful, I would say probably the best Gordon scene pre-meeting Batman is when he is trying to talk down this guy who has a mental illness and is not like in control of his senses, and the cops are like fully ready to shoot him. And Gordon's like, nope, we're not doing that. And he like holds his gun up so the guy sees it and puts it down on the ground and goes in. And his internal monologue is like, I'm terrified, but I want all of us to get out alive. And he does. Right?
Yeah,
it was
that
like,
was great.
It was really moving. Ugh,
and the action was so choreographed so well. I think, Mazzucchelli's art seems simple or like basic, I think at first blush, if you're not like a comics person, but the way he shows the action, you don't need to even read the words. You can just look at his pictures and his art and the narrative already. And I think that's a sign of great comic book art, when you can just look at the page and you already kind of absorb the big beats of the story. And that makes the captions and Miller's words like not dressing, but it amplifies what's already there.
Yeah, I absolutely agree.
Two of the later scenes near the end really worked for me. Where Bruce is right in front of Gordon, but his glasses are off, so he can't see that it's him, and like he like lets him get away kind of. I love that scene. And then of course the end with the Joker card on the rooftop.
That was great.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
And again, right in Batman Begins, straight up.
Okay, did Gordon not know who he was? Because at that point he had already suspected Bruce Wayne, and Bruce had been like, his very flimsy performance that Alfred, who is a trained actor as we know, criticizes as too over the top.
Vaudevillian.
Vaudevillian. And then we see Gordon is like, yeah, sure. Yeah, that seemed true. And then
Yeah, right. I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I was going to say that scene at the end where he's like, I can't see that well without my glasses. And I was like, really? Or are you just
not
saying
to overemphasize that moment, but I took it changed the dynamic for me. I was like, he knows. He's known all this time and he just doesn't want to know.
Right. Which I think is so fun with the later dynamic, because eventually Gordon becomes friends with Bruce Wayne and Batman. So I love the idea that he is friends knowing he's the same person, but acts like he's not the same person when he talks to him.
Yeah, there was a much more like direct tweak along these lines. I think it was in Amazing Spider-Man. I think issue 400, you find out like Aunt May is on her deathbed and she reveals that she's known this whole time, that she's known Peter Parker as Spider-Man. And I think that's a much more in your face like twist, but this felt like a knowing wink, and I'm for it. I think it's cool, and I think it makes sense because Gordon is not dumb.
Right. I think it makes perfect sense. I was kind of losing my mind at the beginning when he was like, it has to be somebody wealthy who hasn't been around for a while. Wonder who that is. And I was like, how is not everybody right? How has not everyone in the city figured out who he is at this point?
Yeah. I like that Bruce was a suspect like right off the bat.
Yeah, me too. Yeah. Right off the bat.
Yeah, it made sense.
I know. I loved it. Went Harvey, Bruce. And I was like, those are the right two suspects. It's one of them. One of those two guys. There's no one else in Gotham that it could be. Let's be honest.
It's true. Yeah. No, I thought that was great.
And then he's like, Harvey doesn't make the kind of money necessary. It can't be Harvey.
Yeah. Yeah, and then you can't really backpedal from that if he gets so close, and then to just for 15 years later just to play dumb and not really get it, like he's too smart for that. So I like the idea that he just knows and he doesn't want to prosecute this guy because he's his friend and helps the city.
Right, exactly. It makes perfect sense to me. I love it. Smart Gordon for the win.
Yes.
My final thing that I can't let us leave without talking about. When Holly is like, that outfit, I mean, it's pretty queer, Selena. And I was like,
little did they know, a bisexual woman. I loved that so much. I definitely wrote that down as well. I loved Selena. I loved the scene of her just covered in like a blanket of cats.
That was great, yeah. And each cat had its own personality, it seemed like.
Yeah.
They each had their own food bowl, all 11 of them. I did.
Well, they're not going to eat from a trough.
Yeah, come on now. They are fancy.
Only the best.
I also loved how she had her cat like intervening in the last fight. Like, I don't know how she controls these cats considering she doesn't have superpowers, but that cat was like, I'll go help Bruce Wayne out.
Yeah, like why does Batman not own a cat yet?
Right. Batman clearly loves cats. He threw someone through a brick wall for hurting a cat.
Yeah, he's like, you're the one that wanted to shoot the cat.
I did cheer at that point.
I did too. I was like, most of that scene, I was like, wow, this is excessive violence. The violence is excessive. And then he was like, I will kill this man that hurt the cat. And I was like, you better.
Yeah. What about the whole bat motif when he like blows a whistle and suddenly a cloud of bats appear? I thought that was cool, and I think it, cinematically and on the page it looked cool.
Yes.
So I enjoyed it. I was willing to give it a pass, even though logically it was like, huh?
Yes. Truly, what is happening?
Right.
And again, okay, you can summon a bat cloud.
and you don't do it all the time. I'm baffled.
Yeah, just this one time.
Yeah. But I let it go.
I know it is one of those things that was like fun, goofy, and so I didn't question it. I laughed out loud when he's had the cop car chasing the bat cloud, and it just goes off the docks, and he's like, he was so committed, he followed it to the end, and I was like, he drove into the Hudson, like into the bay.
Yeah, I was like, who does that? You see the road is ending.
He's like, I will get them.
That's like the coyote and the speed
Roadrunner.
Oh.
Right? 100%. Oh, it was so good. I will say, so circling back to how this ultimately is a story. Rom-com like, it is a story leading to two people getting together. But it is, right? Like the depth of it, though, is that at the beginning, Gordon is like, I don't want to bring a kid into this world. It's so dark. There's no hope. There's no light. There's no point. And there's one moment midway through where he says, there is no hope for Gotham. And the next panel is Batman. Mm-hmm. And then at the end, they are each other's hope.
Yeah.
Yeah. A true bromance.
It is. Bound to...
If this was just Gordon's perspective, it would have been like How I Met Your Mother, but with Batman.
Wait, okay. A petition to get a story where Gordon is telling little Barbara about meeting Batman.
Yeah.
And she's like, where's James? Where's my brother?
Where's my mom, who is also Barbara?
Where's Barbara Sr.?
I also loved that the deciding factor for Batman that Gordon was the one for him is that they hate all the same people. A true petty friendship was born that day.
I have a lot of friendships like that, so I support that.
Yeah.
Who among us is not bound together by hating the same people?
Hate is powerful.
It is.
What would you guys rate this book 1 out of 5 batarangs?
I think if you'd asked me 3 or 4 years ago, I would have, having not read it recently at that time, I would have said 5, definitely. But I think I'm going to give it a 4. I think the art is definitely a 5. I think I just have my head bumps up against some parts of the story, and I think it's a 4. Yeah.
Yeah. I think if you had asked me before having a conversation with Alex about it, I would have given it a 1.
Oh, wow.
Alex has raised it to a shining 2.
That's what I expected of you.
I didn't look. I have not read anything for the show that I hated more than this, but I had fun talking about it. So there's that.
Oh,
that's good. Yeah, we should do this again.
Yeah, we should, absolutely. TJ, how would you rate it?
I would rate this one. I'd also give it a 4. Last time I read it, I gave it like a 4.5 rounded up to 5, but this time, I don't think it holds up as well on a reread, but I could see if you were reading it for the first time and really loved it or hated it in Chris's case. But yeah, I feel like a 4 is pretty fair because there's a lot to enjoy and it's definitely memorable.
Yeah, and I don't think it's bad quality wise. So if we're rating it on quality, I would go higher. I hate gritty, so it's always going to be low for me when we read these.
Yeah, no, I understand that. Makes sense.
Yeah,
I mean, I'm just happy that I was able to push it up to a 2.
Yeah. You did. You really did, because I didn't think I liked anything about it before we started talking. That I was like, okay, there's a few moments I like. So Alex, if you were given the opportunity to write any Batman story or Batman related story in the world, and there is no DC editorial to stop you, what would you write?
What would I write? I would want to write a mini series set in those early years. I think there's a huge gap of time that doesn't feel like canon. Like you see a lot of them on, Legends of the Dark Knight or kind of one-offs, but a canonical, like, aside from Long Halloween, a canonical look at like the early days of Batman and kind of his first experiences against the villains, as opposed to like a crime noir mob story.
Yeah, I like that.
I would read it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
But I will read anything you write. Speaking of which, do you have any projects coming up, and where can our listeners find you on social media?
Oh, you can find me on Twitter at Alex_Segura or on my website, alexsegura.com. My new novel called Secret Identity comes out from Flatiron Books, and it's actually a comic book noir. It's about a woman in the 70s who moves from Miami to New York to work at this fictional comic book company. And her boss basically says, you can't write for us, because she aspires to write comics. And her boss basically says, you're my assistant, not a writer. So she ghostwrites this character called the Lynx, and it becomes a huge hit. And her collaborator is then murdered. So she has to basically solve the murder to reclaim the character and kind of let people know that she's behind this hit story. So it's blending all my favorite things: comics and crime fiction and noir and superheroes. And I'm currently running a Kickstarter called The Dusk, which is kind of my take on the Batman mythos. And it's a byproduct of reading a lot of Batman comics with my son, who's just turned 5. And just kind of seeing, we see them as readers, as how we experience them, but now seeing them through his eyes. There's just some stuff that I bump up against, like the idea that, okay, you just punch the guy, throw him in the back of a cop car, and the problem is solved. And I think there's much more nuance, obviously, in the real world to that. Criminal justice is a complicated and not always great thing. And there's a lot of bigger issues that I think you can interject into a superhero story that doesn't feel like homework. Like maybe the hero should think about this. Maybe the hero should try to find different ways to solve problems. And maybe there's just a different path that can also be told in a fun Batman the Animated Series type way. So The Dusk is this guy, Jaime Nunez, that lives in a fictional city called Blackstone, and he's a public defender. He tries to do good and then comes into some money and realizes, well, I can also do this. I can try it this way. And it's about how he learns that, there's no easy answers. The book doesn't provide answers and explain what the right way to do things is, but it does have a hero that thinks about them, as opposed to just like jumping in feet first, punching everyone and leaving and assuming that your work is done, which isn't a criticism of Batman. Like I love Batman. Obviously, this whole discussion is about my love for the character, but it's really like a tweak. I wanted to create something that I could read as a fan, that we could read as fans and enjoy, because it's a fun superhero story, but I could also give to my son and not feel like it was sending a weird message about how we solve problems.
Yeah, I love that.
Thank you.
Yeah. Well, thank you for coming on.
This is so much fun. I would love to do it again. So
Absolutely.
Not to like shoehorn my way back on, but
please.
This was a blast.
Welcome back to Ask Alex, where we bring on our very own The Question and ask him a riddle of questions. Alex Jaffe, are you here?
Ladies, gentlemen, you have eaten well. You have eaten Gotham's wealth, its spirit. Your feast is nearly over. From this moment on, none of you are safe. Hey, guys.
Oh. I was not expecting a monologue. Hi, Alex.
Yeah.
You are our second Alex this episode.
Oh,
yes, that's true.
Save the best for last.
That's one way to say it, I guess.
Yeah.
No,
Doubling up on our Alexes. Double the Alex, double the trouble.
Sure.
Every Alex is good in their own individual Alex way.
I could find an Alex I don't like.
There's a couple bad ones.
I mean, I'm not going to try. But hit us in the comments if you think you're an Alex I won't like.
Alexander Luthor comes to mind.
Oh no.
Is his name Alexander?
Yeah, short for Lex. Lex for short. Yeah.
I'm learning in this moment he had a longer name.
Yeah.
Well, Alex, we have a few questions for you today.
Shoot.
All right. So our first one, we had to ask. So this is something we've discussed briefly on the show before, but Alex, we want your opinion. Do you think new readers of Batman should start with year one? And if not, like, what's your recommendation of where to start?
Well, TJ, I got to throw this one back to you because before the show, you showed me a really excellent, thorough guide to just the best Batman stories in a very intuitive order for people who are unfamiliar with Batman in the comics to follow. And as someone who's read too many Batman comics, I just have to say it's a wonderful template to showcase all the different flavors of Batman that there are, and to find the whatever your favorite version of Batman is within that. What the best place to start with Batman is a complicated question for that reason, because Batman has been so many things. Sure, Batman Year One is acceptable as a place to start, but I don't think it captures absolutely everything Batman has become. I think it might be my own bias from when and where I grew up, but the best encapsulation of Batman and who he is and his world still remains to this day Batman the Animated Series. The best way to get into Batman is through that cartoon. And after that cartoon, any comic book that has the word adventures in it, Batman Adventures, Batman and Robin Adventures, Gotham Adventures, all this stuff can be found on DC Universe Infinite. If you have a subscription to that in the United States, it's the best way to consume as many comics as you possibly can. If you're trying to get into the archives, I would highly recommend that. A lot of the writers and artists who worked on the show worked on those comics, and it's just such a great transitional way to get from Batman in wider, more popular media into the medium he was created for. I feel like that's the best way to ramp yourself onto how to read a Batman comic.
Yeah, and thank you, Alex, for shouting out my list. So, Chris, I didn't even tell you this, so you're hearing this for the first time, and our listeners, but since I've been reading so much Batman lately, I was like, well, I need to make a list of, like, the required Batman reading, and, like, for people who are, like, new readers, just like me in this podcast journey. So I actually put together, like, a little list and, like, made eras of, like, the beginning.
Look at you.
Right.
So far.
You're gonna have to graduate soon.
So I did send it to Alex and was like, can I get your opinion on this? So
I love the only place it's lacking is there's no pre-1986 material, but new readers should be starting with that anyway, because it's so divorced from modern comic sensibilities. I think once you're more into Batman, that's when you go deep archive diving. For now, this is a great beginner's list.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm a list maker for fun, so I will have to post
You're
it
among friends.
Thank you.
I have several of your lists that I've used for many things at this point.
Yeah, so I'll tweet it out after this goes up.
Yeah, please do.
Absolutely.
Well, Alex, how do you feel that Year One fits into the Frank Miller oeuvre of Batman stories?
Well, there are some big differences between Year One and, to say, the Dark Knight Returns, Dark Knight Strikes Again, Master Race, All-Star Batman and Robin. That's more of a super heightened, larger than life icon figure, and this is a very much more grounded attempt to tell the story of Batman at the beginning of his career. So it's by design a lot more. You can tell it's by the same guy. He has a lot of the same hallmarks, but
sure can.
It is the one that stands out as the most, as hewing the closest to who we recognize Batman is as a character. And there are a number of reasons for that. First of all, editor Denny O'Neil was on board for this. Denny is the master of all things Batman from the 70s to like up through no man's land. He was the shepherd of basically everyone's idea of what Batman is, and he was he was in charge of this project in a way that he was not involved with the Dark Knight Returns. There's Dave Mazzucchelli's art, which it does a lot more to ground the story. Mazzucchelli, an incredible comic maker in his own right. If you haven't checked out Asterius Polyp, it's one of the best independent comics I've ever read. Highly recommend that. There's the fact that this was happening right after Crisis on Infinite Earth. Superman and Wonder Woman were both starting over from scratch, and Denny said, "Hey, we need a Batman origin story." This is the idea is that we are reintroducing readers to the ideas of these characters. And Frank was the one who said, "Oh, I don't want to restart Batman from scratch. I don't want to make this Batman #1." And that's why it's 404 through 407, because Miller didn't want to disrespect all of the writers and artists that he grew up reading. So with that intentionality in mind of continuing that Batman tradition, rather than recreating this story of an aging hero who he saw himself as, even in the 80s, he was trying to tell Batman stories opposed to his own story through Batman's. And really the biggest thing about Batman Year One, what sets it apart from the other one, Batman stories, is that this isn't a Batman story. Batman Year One is a Daredevil story. 1 year before Batman Year One, Frank Miller and Dave Mazzucchelli collaborated on a Daredevil reboot, which took away all of his trappings, all of his allies, everything he had established, and forced him to start over from scratch. And it is beat for beat this comic, except without the fall. And based on the strength of that, that's what led Frank and David to approach Batman from this angle, from this exact approach that they had developed just the year before between Dark Knight Returns and this. And what sets it apart is that what you're really seeing here is a second draft of a story they had already told.
That's so funny, especially with the Chip Zdarsky announcement recently.
Oh yeah,
him being on Daredevil right now, and now he's taking Batman. But I'm so excited.
Yeah, that's funny. So you're saying that it is less heightened misogyny and more real world misogyny.
Right, of course.
Got it, cool. As long as we're clear.
Yeah, you get Commissioner Gordon cheating on his wife as opposed to a super Nazi lady with swastika pasties. It's a more grounded misogyny.
That's how I like my misogyny. Grounded.
Yeah. Yes, all men. Yes, all men, even Gordon.
Well, our last question for you, Alex. What's the most glaringly obvious signs that Gordon actually knows who Batman is? Does anything top literally seeing his face with his own two glassesless eyes?
That's up there. That's absolutely up there. I do have a favorite one, but before I get to that, Batman Blind Justice by Sam Hamm is a pretty fascinating arc. Sam Hamm was the guy who wrote the script for the 1989 Batman movie. Around the same time, he wrote a sort of Batman origin story of his own, which introduced the character of Henry Ducard, who you might know from Batman Begins. The framing story of that was that Wayne Enterprises was looking into what Bruce was doing during that whole international travel segment, because they were not keen about handing over the company to this ne'er-do-well. And by tracing his activities throughout the world, they came to the same conclusion that anyone possibly could have. Bruce Wayne is a Soviet spy.
Story checks out.
Yeah. So when they brought Bruce Wayne to the stand in the story set in the modern day, which was the framework for those early Bruce training stories, they call Commissioner Gordon to the stand to testify against Bruce. And Gordon's like, I know you're not a communist. I know you're up to something, but it's like, for the sake of my friendship, I don't look into it. And it's very clear from that Gordon knows what's up. And that's something that Scott Snyder also hammered in, like, for the end of his own Batman run through Super Heavy and through All-Star Batman. Scott Snyder would always say regarding the Bruce Wayne identity that, sure, a lot of people suspect that Bruce Wayne is Batman, but good luck proving it. And that was the case with Gordon. When Batman went missing after Endgame, Gordon went looking for Bruce Wayne. Just like, oh, I know you're quote unquote friends with Batman, but like the subtext is there that he knows Bruce is Batman. My absolute favorite incident of Gordon clearly knowing what Batman's deal is in Batman No Man's Land, Legends of the Dark Knight number 125, the absolute shippiest Batman Gordon issue of all time. Where Gordon just feels so betrayed by the fact that Batman left him and left the city in its hour of direst need. And he's coming back and expecting their relationship to be just fine, like he never left. And as a show of good faith, right there in Commissioner Gordon's own garden, Batman uncowls in front of him and says, look at me, this is who I am. And he refuses to turn around. He won't do it. He's like, you're gonna regret this in the morning. I know you're trying to prove that our relationship is stronger than this, that you trust me with this identity, and I'm processing that, but I don't need to know it. But he knows. He obviously knows. And it's the same thing that we keep seeing over and over again every time that Barbara Gordon reveals her identity to James. Like every time there's the indication, yeah, he always knew. Right. Yeah, the new Batman Adventures episode, Over the Edge, being kind of my favorite example of that. But yeah, Gordon totally knows who Batman is. He totally knew who Batman was from the beginning, but he maintains that plausible deniability for the same reason he keeps a bat signal very illegally on top of the GCPD, because it's what's best for the city in a systemically corrupt system.
I was going to say because he's in love, but your explanation makes sense too.
Yeah.
Well, speaking of shipping Batman and James Gordon, me and Alex just went on the Panel to Panel podcast and talked about the new Batman movie, which has some very good Batman Jim Gordon content. So check that out. And of course, we will end up doing an episode over on our end as well, because Chris has to see it and we have to talk about how much shipping is in it.
I'm so
there's
ready.
A lot. There's a lot.
Yeah,
I'm the last Batman fan in the world to not see it. I know. Don't judge me.
We're going to have a good time with it. But I figured I would plug that here since we're talking about something relevant.
Yeah.
And it draws from this story a lot. So,
Absolutely, it does. Yes.
Alex, thank you so much for joining us once again.
Anytime.
Join us next time when we'll be reading
Batman the Imposter by Mattson Tomlin and Andrea Sorrentino,
with special guest Steve Say from Talking Comics. We're so excited to talk about this one, especially in light of the new movie coming out.
Yes.
And we're excited to have Talking Comics fam coming over to our show again.
Yay! I can't wait. And after seeing the new movie, I'm so excited to revisit this one, and because I've read part of it right now, and just look at it through this new lens and see similarities and how it relates to the new film.
Yeah, we're gonna get therapeutic up in here. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Gotham Outsiders. You can find me, Chris, on Twitter at The Myth of Psyche, where I talk feminism, queerness, psychology, books, and oftentimes Batman. You can also now find me at talkingcomics.com, where I write reviews and a column and sometimes the news about comics. You'd also find my co-host TJ
at TroyFin2 on Twitter, where I talk about all things book related and Batman more often than I used to.
And you can find us both on Twitter at Gotham Outsiders, where we talk about Batman all the time. Join us next time. Same bat time, same bat place.